Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. Timothy slouched through the bustling alien marketplace, his keen eyes scanning the kaleidoscope of beings from across the galaxy. His tattered clothes and unkempt appearance belied the immense power lurking beneath. For a week, he'd embraced the life of a vagrant on this backwater planet, seeking any spark of challenge in his monotonous existence. The cacophony of alien languages and the pungent aroma of exotic foods assaulted his senses. Timothy scratched his scraggly beard, grimacing at the layer of grime coating his fingers. He'd certainly nailed the homeless look, but the constant itch was becoming more irritating than challenging. "Maybe I should have tried being a mime instead," he muttered, earning confused glances from nearby vendors. At least then, I'd have an excuse not to talk to people. A commotion near the center of the marketplace caught his attention. Timothy's eyes narrowed as he spotted a group of burly mercenaries surrounding a woman and child. The woman's sapphire skin and flowing pink hair stood out even in this diverse crowd. She held her daughter close, her posture regal despite the fear evident in her eyes. Timothy's lips curled into a smirk. Finally, something interesting. He sauntered closer, catching snippets of the confrontation. "Come now, Princess Adelina," a scarred mercenary growled, his tentacles writhing menacingly. "The Empire's bounty on you and the little one is too good to pass up. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Adelina's voice was ice. "I'd rather die than return to that gilded cage. You'll have to kill me first." "That can be arranged," another mercenary sneered, reaching for his blaster. Timothy's mind raced, concocting a suitably ridiculous challenge. 3 seconds, hands only. Perfect. "Hey, fellas," he called out, his voice slurring slightly for effect. "How about a little show?" The mercenaries turned, confusion quickly morphing into amusement at the sight of the disheveled human. "Beat it, beggar," the leader spat. "This doesn't concern you." Timothy stumbled forward, feigning drunkenness. "Aw, come on. I bet I could take all of you down in, let's say, 3 seconds, with just my hands." Raucous laughter erupted from the group. Even Adelina looked at him like he'd sprouted a second head. "You hear that, boys?" The leader chuckled. "Looks like we've got ourselves a comedian." Timothy grinned, counting down in his head. 3, 2, 1. In a blur of motion almost too fast for the eye to follow, Timothy struck. His hands became a whirlwind, delivering precise blows that sent mercenaries flying in all directions. Bodies crumpled to the ground in rapid succession, accompanied by the sickening crunch of broken bones and pained groans. True to his word, exactly 3 seconds later, Timothy stood amid a sea of unconscious mercenaries. He cracked his knuckles, a look of mild disappointment on his face. "Huh," he mused. "That was actually easier than I thought. Maybe I should have tried it blindfolded." Adelina gaped at him, her azure features a mix of awe and disbelief. Her daughter peeked out from behind her legs, eyes wide with wonder. What are you?" Adelina stammered. Timothy shrugged, plucking a couple of strange, spiky fruits from a nearby stall. He tossed one to the vendor, who was too stunned to object. "Just a guy looking for a good time," he replied, taking a bite of the fruit. He grimaced at the sour taste. "Though I'm starting to think I picked the wrong planet for that." He turned to leave, already contemplating his next self-imposed challenge. Maybe he'd try to overthrow a dictator using only bad puns and interpretive dance. "Wait!" Adelina called out, her voice tinged with desperation. She grabbed his arm, her touch sending an unexpected jolt through Timothy's body. He turned, raising an eyebrow at the contact. Adelina's eyes darted around nervously. We need your help. The Galactic Empire won't stop hunting us. I can be your concubine if you'll protect us." Timothy blinked, then burst out laughing. Adelina recoiled, clearly offended. Sorry, he said, wiping tears from his eyes. It's just a concubine? Really? That's way too easy. And boring. Adelina's brow furrowed. Easy? Boring? I'll have you know I'm considered one of the most desirable. Timothy held up a hand, cutting her off. I'm sure you are, Blue. But here's the thing, I don't do easy. Now, if you want a real challenge. He stroked his chin thoughtfully, a mischievous glint in his eye. How about this? I'll help you out, but I'll only use a tiny fraction of my power. That should keep things interesting. Adelina stared at him, completely baffled. Are you insane? The Empire will send entire fleets after us. Exactly. Timothy grinned. Now we're talking. So what do you say? Up for a little galactic adventure? Before Adelina could respond, alarms blared throughout the marketplace. Imperial troops poured in from all directions, their stark white armor a stark contrast to the colorful chaos around them. Halt! A mechanized voice boomed. By order of the Galactic Emperor, the fugitive Adelina and her offspring are to be apprehended immediately. Timothy cracked his knuckles, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Well, Princess, looks like decision time. Stick with the charming, possibly unhinged stranger, or take your chances with the trigger-happy stormtroopers. What'll it be? Adelina hesitated for a moment, then squared her shoulders. I must be out of my mind, she muttered, then nodded to Timothy. All right, stranger, show me what you can do. Timothy's grin widened. Oh, this is going to be fun. All right, new challenge. Take out all these troops without moving my feet, and go. As blaster fire erupted around them, Timothy became a whirlwind of motion. His upper body twisted and contorted in impossible ways, deflecting bolts with his bare hands and sending them ricocheting back at the stunned troopers. All the while, his feet remained firmly planted on the ground. Adelina watched in awe as the strange human decimated the Imperial forces without breaking a sweat. Her daughter cheered, clearly delighted by the spectacle. Mommy, he's like a superhero, the little girl exclaimed. Adelina couldn't help but smile. I'm not sure hero is the right word, sweetheart, but he's certainly something. As the last trooper fell, Timothy stretched languidly. Well, that was a nice warm-up. So, Blue, ready to blow this popsicle stand? Adelina nodded, still struggling to process what she'd just witnessed. Yes, but where will we go? Timothy's eyes twinkled with mischief. Oh, I'm sure we'll figure something out. The galaxy's a big place, after all. Plenty of trouble to get into. He extended his hand to Adelina, wiggling his fingers invitingly. So what do you say? Ready for the adventure of a lifetime? Adelina hesitated for a moment, then took his hand. Despite the grime, his grip was strong and oddly comforting. I suppose I don't have much choice, do I? Oh, there's always a choice, Timothy replied with a wink. It's just that some choices are a lot more fun than others. As they made their way through the chaos of the marketplace, dodging panicked aliens and debris, Adelina couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a deal with some kind of trickster god. But as she watched Timothy effortlessly dispatch another group of Imperial soldiers while hopping on one foot, his latest self-imposed challenge, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this madman was exactly what she and her daughter needed. So, Timothy called over his shoulder as they raced towards the spaceport, I'm thinking our first stop should be somewhere nice and dangerous. How do you feel about active volcanoes? Adelina groaned. It was going to be a very long journey. As they approached the docking bays, a massive Imperial cruiser loomed overhead, casting an ominous shadow over the spaceport. Adelina's heart sank. We'll never make it, she said, clutching her daughter close. They've blocked off all the exits. Timothy's eyes gleamed with excitement. Now you're talking. A real challenge. He rubbed his hands together gleefully. Okay, new parameters. Steal a ship, break through the blockade, and make it to hyperspace. And to make it interesting, I'll do it all while reciting bad poetry. Adelina stared at him incredulously. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm always serious about being ridiculous, Timothy replied with a wink. He cleared his throat dramatically. Ahem. There once was a man from Nantucket. Please don't, Adelina interrupted, pinching the bridge of her nose. Timothy pouted. Everyone's a critic. Fine. How about haikus instead? Before Adelina could object further, Timothy sprinted towards the nearest ship, a sleek, obviously expensive yacht. Imperial troops swarmed around it, but Timothy plowed through them like bowling pins. Shiny spaceship, yay, he called out. Imps fall down, go boom, time to fly. With impossible speed, Timothy cleared the area around the ship, tossing soldiers left and right. He practically danced up the boarding ramp, gesturing for Adelina and her daughter to follow. Come on, Blue, he shouted. Adventure awaits. Adelina hesitated for a split second, then raced after him, her daughter giggling in her arms. As they entered the ship, Timothy was already in the pilot's seat, his fingers flying over the controls. Buckle up, kids, he said, flashing them a manic grin. This is where the fun begins. The ship's engines roared to life, and they shot out of the docking bay like a cork from a bottle. Adelina clutched her seat, her knuckles turning a pale blue as Timothy executed a series of wild maneuvers, weaving through the Imperial blockade. Lasers go pew-pew, Timothy intoned solemnly. We zoom very fast. Please don't barf inside. Despite the insanity of the situation, Adelina found herself laughing. Her daughter cheered with each near miss and barrel roll. As they broke through the planet's atmosphere, the Imperial cruiser loomed before them, its massive guns tracking their approach. Oh, big mean ship, Timothy narrated. Time to do something dumb. Hold on to your butts. He yanked the controls hard, sending them into a spiraling dive directly towards the cruiser's bridge. Adelina's stomach lurched, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the viewport. At the last possible second, Timothy pulled up, skimming the cruiser's surface. The confused Imperial gunners, unable to track them at such close range, ended up firing on their own ship in their attempts to hit the small yacht. Oopsie-daisy, my bad, Timothy cackled. Friendly fire isn't. Now let's blow this joint. With a final burst of speed, they cleared the cruiser's mass shadow. Timothy's hand hovered over the hyperdrive lever. Roses are red, violets are blue, he declared. Time to make the jump, Yahoo! The stars stretched into lines, and they vanished into the swirling vortex of hyperspace. As the adrenaline faded, Adelina slumped in her seat, exhausted but exhilarated. She turned to Timothy, who was lounging in the pilot's chair with his feet up on the console, munching on another of those spiky fruits. I don't even know where to begin, she said. Who are you? Really? Timothy shrugged, tossing the fruit's core over his shoulder. I told you, Blue. I'm just a guy looking for a good time, although... He grinned at her, his eyes twinkling. I have a feeling things are about to get a lot more interesting with you two around. Adelina couldn't help but smile back. You're absolutely insane, you know that? Sanity's overrated, Timothy replied with a wink. Now, how about we find somewhere fun to lay low for a while? I hear the lava beaches of Mustafar are lovely this time of year. As Adelina groaned and her daughter cheered, Timothy leaned back in his chair, a content smile on his face. For the first time in ages, he felt a glimmer of genuine excitement. Whatever came next, it certainly wouldn't be boring. The adventure had only just begun. The stolen yacht hurtled through hyperspace, its occupants an unlikely trio. Timothy sprawled in the pilot's seat, feet propped on the console, idly tossing a glowing orb from hand to hand. Adelina sat rigidly beside him, her sapphire skin practically vibrating with tension. In the back, little Mia giggled as she explored every nook and cranny of the luxurious ship. "So," Timothy drawled, breaking the silence, "where to, Blue? Got any fun hideouts in mind?" Adelina's pink hair whipped around as she glared at him. "This isn't a game. The entire Imperial fleet will be hunting us." Timothy's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. Now that's what I call a party." He leaned in conspiratorially. "How about we crash the Emperor's summer palace? I hear the security's top-notch." "Are you insane?" Adelina hissed. "Probably," Timothy shrugged. "But sanity's overrated, remember?" Before Adelina could retort, alarms blared. The ship shuddered as it was yanked out of hyperspace. "Ooh, company!" Timothy grinned, studying the readout. "Looks like a whole squadron of Imperial cruisers. This should be fun." Adelina's face paled to a lighter shade of blue. "We're doomed." "Nah, just challenged," Timothy winked. He cracked his knuckles dramatically. "All right, new parameters. Take out the entire fleet, using only my left hand." "What?" Adelina sputtered. "That's impossible." Her words died as Timothy sprang into action. With his right hand firmly behind his back, he danced across the controls. The yacht pirouetted between massive cruisers, spraying fire from its tiny guns. Somehow, each shot found a critical weak point. Explosions bloomed in the void of space. "We!" Mia cheered from the back. "Do it again, Mr. Timothy." Timothy obliged, sending them into a corkscrew dive that had Adelina's stomach lurching. "Your wish is my command, princess," he called back. "How about we try this upside down?" The ship inverted, and Timothy's left hand became a blur. Impossibly, more Imperial ships erupted into flames. Within minutes, the entire squadron was reduced to drifting debris. Adelina gaped at the devastation, then at Timothy's nonchalant grin. How did you—" "Oh, that?" Timothy waved dismissively with his left hand. "Child's play. Now if you want a real challenge, I could do it blindfolded next time." As they jumped to hyperspace once more, Adelina found herself torn between exasperation and grudging admiration. This strange human was either their salvation or would get them all killed in spectacular fashion. Days blurred together as they planet-hopped across the galaxy. Each stop brought new dangers and new ridiculous self-imposed challenges for Timothy. On a swamp world, he dispatched a platoon of Imperial troops while hopping on one foot and reciting terrible limericks. In a bustling spaceport, he sabotaged an entire Star Destroyer systems without using his hands at all, relying solely on a series of increasingly absurd dance moves. During a high-speed chase through an asteroid field, he piloted their ship using only his elbows while simultaneously juggling those spiky fruits he seemed to love so much. Through it all, Mia's delighted laughter rang out. The little girl had taken to Timothy like a fish to water, utterly enchanted by his antics. Adelina found her initial irritation softening, despite her best efforts to remain aloof. One evening, they made camp on a desolate desert world. Twin moons hung low in the sky, casting everything in an ethereal blue glow. Mia had finally succumbed to sleep, curled up in a nest of blankets nearby. Adelina watched Timothy as he lounged by the fire, his expression for once contemplative rather than mischievous. "Why do you do it?" she asked softly. Timothy's eyes flickered to her, a hint of surprise in their depths. "Do what?" "Be devastatingly handsome and charming." Adelina rolled her eyes, but there was no real heat in it. "You know what I mean. All these challenges, the constant jokes. You're clearly powerful enough to rule the galaxy if you wanted. Why this?" For a long moment, Timothy was silent, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, stripped of its usual bravado. "When you're unbeatable, life loses its flavor," he said. These challenges, they're the only thing that makes me feel alive anymore. Adelina leaned forward, sensing there was more to the story. But why seek that power in the first place? Timothy's lips quirked in a humorless smile. Once upon a time, I was just a scrawny kid watching the strong prey on the weak. Couldn't do a damn thing about it. His fist clenched at his side. But I was never afraid, not once. I wanted that strength so badly I could taste it. He let out a bitter laugh. Funny thing is, when I finally got it, well, be careful what you wish for, right? Adelina's hand twitched as if to reach out to him, but she held back. And now? Timothy's eyes met hers, and for a fleeting moment she glimpsed a profound loneliness behind the mirth. Now? Now I'm just trying to feel something. Anything. The vulnerability vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by his trademark grin. But hey, enough of that sappy stuff. How about we liven things up? I bet I can juggle these embers with my toes. As Timothy proceeded to do just that, yelping comically each time he singed himself, Adelina found herself smiling despite herself. There was more to this infuriating man than met the eye, and she was beginning to see glimpses of the person behind the mask. Their journey continued, a chaotic whirlwind of narrow escapes and increasingly outlandish stunts. Timothy's antics never failed to keep Mia entertained, even in the face of danger. During one particularly harrowing battle, as laser fire erupted around them, Timothy scooped up Mia and spun her around, turning the firefight into an impromptu dance lesson. "All right, princess," he grinned, effortlessly deflecting blaster bolts with one hand while twirling the giggling girl with the other. "Let's work on your waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, dodge the explosion. 1, 2, 3. Adelina wanted to be furious, but the sound of her daughter's laughter, so rare since their life had been upended, melted her resolve. As the weeks passed, Adelina found herself softening towards Timothy. His irreverence and seemingly suicidal challenges still drove her to distraction, but she couldn't deny the growing warmth in her chest when she watched him with Mia, or the way her pulse quickened when he flashed that infuriating, charming grin her way. For his part, Timothy felt something shifting within himself. The constant need for ever more ridiculous challenges began to take a back seat to simpler pleasures. Mia's delighted squeals when he showed her a new trick, or the rare, genuine smile that graced Adelina's face when she thought he wasn't looking. One night, as they huddled in the cramped quarters of yet another stolen ship, Mia fast asleep between them, Timothy found himself studying Adelina's profile in the dim light, the elegant curve of her jaw, the way her pink hair fell across her forehead. "You're staring," Adelina murmured, not opening her eyes. "Can you blame me?" Timothy quipped, but there was a softness to his tone that hadn't been there before. "The view's not bad." Adelina's eyes fluttered open, meeting his gaze. For a moment the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Then a proximity alarm shattered the moment. Timothy was on his feet in an instant, his usual manic grin sliding into place. "Showtime," he declared. "What do you say we give our Imperial friends a real spectacle this time?" As they raced to the cockpit, Adelina couldn't quite suppress her own smile. "Just try not to blow us all up in the process," she warned. "Oh, yea, of little faith," Timothy winked. "When have I ever let you down?" The battle that followed was Timothy's most audacious performance yet. He piloted their tiny ship through the heart of an Imperial armada, all while balancing on one foot, eyes closed, and humming an off-key rendition of an old Corellian drinking song. Somehow, impossibly, they emerged victorious. As the last Star Destroyer erupted into a brilliant fireball, Timothy opened his eyes and gave a theatrical bow. "Ta-da!" he exclaimed. "Now that's what I call." He trailed off, noticing Adelina's expression. "What's wrong, Blue? Not impressed by my death-defying heroics?" Adelina's brow furrowed. It's not that. It's just, Timothy, did you plan this? Plan what? He asked innocently, but there was a glimmer in his eye that gave him away. This. Adelina gestured to the viewport where the remains of the Imperial fleet drifted. The entire armada, the impossible odds. Did you deliberately lead us into this trap? Timothy's grin turned sheepish. Well, maybe. I mean, come on, Blue. We needed to thin out their forces eventually. Might as well do it with style, right? Adelina's jaw dropped. You risked all our lives for what? A thrill? Hey now. Timothy held up his hands. I had it under control the whole time. Mostly. Like, at least 60% under control. Before Adelina could respond, a new alarm blared. The ship's computer announced the approach of an even larger Imperial force. Ah, Timothy rubbed the back of his neck. That would be the backup I maybe sorta knew was coming. Don't suppose you'd believe me if I said this was part of the plan too? Adelina's glare could have melted Durasteel. Right, Timothy nodded. So, fancy a trip to that Imperial space station? I hear the view's lovely this time of year. As they rocketed towards what looked like certain doom, Adelina couldn't decide if she wanted to kiss Timothy or throw him out the airlock. Possibly both. The massive space station loomed before them, bristling with weapons. Squadrons of TIE fighters swarmed like angry insects. It was a death trap, plain and simple. And Timothy was grinning like a madman. Now this, he declared, cracking his knuckles, is what I call a party. All right, new challenge. Take down the entire station, while giving Mia her first piloting lesson. What? Adelina yelped. Timothy, she's 5. Never too early to start. Timothy scooped up the wide-eyed Mia, plopping her in his lap at the controls. Ready to be Daddy's little co-pilot, princess? Mia's answering squeal of delight was nearly drowned out by the sound of Imperial weapons fire erupting around them. As their tiny ship danced through the maelstrom, Timothy's laughter mingled with Mia's giggles and Adelina's half-hearted protests. And despite the insanity of it all, despite the very real danger they were in, Adelina felt something warm bloom in her chest. This ridiculous, impossible man had brought more light into their lives in a few short weeks than she'd known in years. As Timothy guided Mia's small hands over the controls, expertly weaving them through a hail of laser fire, Adelina realized with a start that she wouldn't trade this, any of this, for all the safety in the galaxy. The battle raged on, Timothy turning what should have been certain death into a grand spectacle. With Mia helping at the controls, they spun and dove, leaving chaos in their wake. Somehow, between Timothy's impossible skills and Mia's joyous button-mashing, critical systems across the station began to fail. That's my girl, Timothy crowed as another section of the station erupted in flames. You're a natural. Adelina, strapped into the co-pilot's seat, alternated between gasping in terror and reluctant amazement. Timothy, she managed between barrel rolls, when we survive this, if we survive this, we're going to have a long talk about appropriate activities for children. Timothy shot her a wink. Oh, come on, Blue. Nothing brings a family together like a little high-stakes space combat, right? As if to punctuate his point, a massive explosion rocked the station. Alarms blared, announcing an imminent reactor overload. And that's our cue to make a dashing exit, Timothy declared. He scooped Mia up, tossing her gently to Adelina. Strap in, ladies. This is gonna be a bumpy ride. With a whoop of pure exhilaration, Timothy sent their ship hurtling towards a rapidly closing docking bay. They squeezed through mere seconds before massive blast doors slammed shut, the heat of the explosion nipping at their heels. As they burst free of the dying station's gravity well, Timothy executed a perfect barrel roll. Behind them, The Imperial fortress erupted in a spectacular ball of fire. Now that, Timothy grinned, turning to his shell-shocked passengers, is how you make an exit. Mia cheered, bouncing in Adelina's lap. Again! Again! Adelina couldn't help it. She burst out laughing. It was either that or cry. You, she said, fixing Timothy with a look that was equal parts exasperation and fondness, are absolutely insane. Guilty as charged, Timothy replied with a wink. But admit it, Blue, you're having fun. As they rocketed away from the debris field, leaving the shattered remains of the Imperial fleet in their wake, Adelina found she couldn't argue. For all the danger, for all the madness, she hadn't felt this alive in years. The adventure, it seemed, was far from over, and despite her better judgment, Adelina found herself looking forward to whatever insanity Timothy had planned next. The stolen yacht drifted through the inky void of deep space, its occupants basking in the afterglow of their latest impossible victory. Timothy lounged in the pilot's seat, feet propped on the console, a familiar mischievous glint in his eye. Adelina sat beside him, her sapphire skin practically glowing in the starlight, while Mia dozed contentedly in her lap. "So," Timothy drawled, breaking the comfortable silence, "what's next on our grand galactic tour? I hear the acid rain on Vune is lovely this time of year." Adelina rolled her eyes, but there was no real exasperation behind it anymore. "How about somewhere without mortal peril for a change? Where's the fun in that?" Timothy winked, but there was something softer in his expression as he gazed at Adelina and Mia, a warmth he hadn't felt in, well, longer than he cared to admit. Adelina must have noticed the shift because her own expression turned thoughtful. "Timothy," she began hesitantly, "I've been meaning to ask, how did you become, well, you?" The playful gleam in Timothy's eyes dimmed, replaced by a shadow of old pain. For a long moment he was silent, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. "It's not exactly a bedtime story, Blue," he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically somber. Adelina reached out, her blue hand resting gently on his arm. "I'd like to know, if you're willing to share." Timothy took a deep breath, then nodded. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you." He settled back in his chair, his eyes taking on a faraway look. "Once upon a time," he began, a wry smile tugging at his lips, "there was a scrawny kid on a backwater world. Nothing special about him except maybe his knack for finding trouble. And boy, did he find it?" As Timothy spoke, the story unfolded like a holodrama. He painted a vivid picture of a harsh world where the strong preyed on the weak, where a young boy watched helplessly as everything he loved was torn away. "I lost everyone," Timothy said quietly. "My family, my friends, all gone because I wasn't strong enough to protect them." Adelina's grip on his arm tightened, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "But you know what?" Timothy continued, a fierce light kindling in his eyes. "I wasn't afraid, not once. I was angry, and I swore I'd become strong enough that nothing could ever hurt me or anyone I cared about again." Timothy's tale took a dark turn then. He spoke of forbidden knowledge, of ancient artifacts and cosmic forces beyond comprehension, of sacrifices made and prices paid. "I got what I wanted," he said, his voice hollow. "All the power in the universe. But it came at a cost. I couldn't feel anything. Fear, joy, love. It all just faded away." He gestured expansively. "So I started pushing myself. Crazy stunts, impossible odds, anything to feel that rush again, to feel alive." Silence fell in the cockpit as Timothy's words hung in the air. Adelina's hand had moved from his arm to tightly grip his own. "And now?" she asked softly. Timothy turned to her, really looked at her, and felt something stir in his chest. something he thought he'd lost long ago. "Now?" he said, a genuine smile replacing his usual cocky grin. "Now I'm starting to think I might have found something worth more than all that power." His gaze shifted to the sleeping Mia, then back to Adelina. "Your smiles, your laughter, the way you roll your eyes when I do something stupid." He chuckled. "Which, let's face it, is pretty often." Adelina's breath caught in her throat. "Timothy." But before she could continue, alarms blared throughout the ship. The moment shattered as they both snapped to attention. "Proximity alert," Timothy announced, his fingers flying over the controls. "Looks like your old Imperial friends found us again." Adelina's face hardened. "They won't stop, will they? Not until—" "Hey," Timothy cut her off, his trademark grin sliding back into place. "What do you say we put an end to this chase once and for all?" Adelina blinked. "What do you mean?" Timothy's eyes gleamed with that familiar mix of mischief and danger. "I mean, let's go big or go home. One last hurrah to send a message they won't soon forget." As he outlined his audacious plan, Adelina found herself torn between disbelief and exhilaration. It was insane, of course. But then again, when had anything about their journey been sane? "You're sure about this?" she asked, even as a smile tugged at her lips. Timothy winked. "Blue, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Well, except maybe my devastating good looks." Adelina rolled her eyes, but there was no hiding the fondness in her expression. "All right then, let's do this." What followed was a whirlwind of action that would have made their previous escapades look tame by comparison. Timothy piloted their small ship straight into the heart of the Imperial fleet, weaving between massive star destroyers with impossible precision. But this time, there was a new energy to his movements, a purpose beyond mere thrill-seeking. As they neared the Imperial flagship, Timothy turned to Adelina. "Ready for your starring role, Blue?" Adelina took a deep breath, then nodded. "As I'll ever be." With a theatrical flourish, Timothy opened a comm channel to the entire Imperial fleet. Adelina's regal voice filled the airwaves, delivering a scathing condemnation of the Empire's tyranny and declaring her intent to build a new, just society far from their reach. Meanwhile, Timothy's hands became a blur over the controls. Weapon systems across the fleet suddenly went haywire, turning on their own ships. Engines sputtered and died, and through it all, their tiny ship danced unscathed. And now, Timothy grinned as chaos erupted around them, for the grand finale. He punched in a series of commands, and suddenly, every screen across the Imperial Armada lit up with a gaudy, animated caricature of the Emperor himself, dancing to a jaunty tune and declaring his retirement to become a Twi'lek interpretive dancer. As the Imperial forces descended into complete pandemonium, Timothy sent their ship rocketing away, leaving the wreckage of the once mighty fleet in their wake. "And that," he declared with a flourish, "is how you make an exit." Adelina burst out laughing, a sound of pure, unbridled joy. "You're absolutely mad," she gasped between giggles. "Guilty as charged," Timothy replied with a wink, "but admit it, you wouldn't have me any other way." As they soared away from the debris field, leaving their pursuers in disarray, a sense of finality settled over them. One chapter of their lives had closed, but another was just beginning. "So," Adelina said softly, her hand finding Timothy's. "Where to now?" Timothy's expression softened as he gazed at her, then at the still sleeping Mia. "How about we find somewhere to call home? Somewhere quiet. Well, relatively quiet. I'm thinking I might need to redefine my idea of a challenge." Adelina's eyes widened. "You mean—" Timothy nodded, a warm smile replacing his usual smirk. "Yeah, I think it's time for a new adventure. One that doesn't involve quite so many explosions. Well, maybe just a few, for old time's sake. As they set course for a distant, peaceful world, Timothy felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It wasn't the adrenaline rush he'd chased for so long. It was something warmer, more profound. He realized, with a start, that it was happiness. Real, genuine happiness. The years that followed were a whirlwind of joy, laughter, and yes, the occasional bout of insanity. Timothy and Adelina settled on a remote world, building a home that was equal parts domestic bliss and barely contained chaos. Mia grew into a vivacious young woman, inheriting her adoptive father's penchant for death-defying stunts and her mother's regal bearing. She became the terror of the local swoop bike racing circuit, much to Adelina's chagrin and Timothy's poorly concealed pride. And as Adelina had once joked, their family did indeed grow. 3 more children joined their brood, each one a perfect blend of Timothy's mischief and Adelina's grace. There was Zara, with skin as blue as her mother's and a knack for reprogramming droids to do increasingly ridiculous tasks. Then came the twins, Nova and Orion, whose idea of sibling bonding involved elaborate pranks that often left the entire household in cheerful disarray. Through it all, Timothy found himself continually amazed, not by death-defying feats or cosmic power, but by the simple joys of family life. The warmth of Adelina's smile as she greeted him each morning, the pride that swelled in his chest as he watched Mia take her first solo flight, the laughter of his younger children as he regaled them with, slightly edited, tales of his past adventures. Of course, old habits died hard. Timothy still couldn't resist the occasional outrageous stunt, much to Adelina's mix of exasperation and amusement. There was the time he decided to spruce up the local planetary defense system, leaving the stodgy military officials sputtering as their serious war games were replaced by a galactic version of Capture the Flag. Or the day he chose to teach the kids about zero gravity by temporarily neutralizing the planet's gravitational field. The sight of startled neighbors and livestock floating past their windows was one the family wouldn't soon forget. But as the years passed, Timothy found that his greatest challenge and his greatest joy was in the everyday moments, in being a husband, a father, a friend. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home watching twin suns set over the horizon, Adelina turned to him with a knowing smile. "So," she said, a teasing lilt to her voice, "still finding enough of a challenge in this quiet life." Timothy glanced at her, then at their brood of cheerfully chaotic children playing in the yard. Mia was teaching the twins some new acrobatic move that would undoubtedly result in at least one broken vase, while Zara tinkered with a droid that seemed to be developing a concerning degree of self-awareness. He chuckled, pulling Adelina close. "You know what, Blue? I think I've finally found the greatest challenge of all." "Oh?" Adelina raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Timothy's eyes twinkled with a mix of mischief and genuine warmth. "Learning to love, knowing I could lose it all again. Turns out that takes more courage than facing down a whole Imperial fleet." Adelina's expression softened, and she leaned in to kiss him gently. "Well," she murmured, "I'd say you're rising to the challenge admirably." As night fell and stars began to twinkle overhead, Timothy reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a scared, angry boy to a nigh omnipotent being chasing endless thrills, and finally to this, a man who had found true happiness in the love of his family. He realized that true fearlessness wasn't about the absence of fear, but about having the courage to love deeply, despite all the risks. And that, he mused as he gazed at his beautiful, impossible family, was the most exciting adventure of all. The galaxy might not tremble at his name anymore, but Timothy found he didn't mind one bit. He had traded cosmic power for bedtime stories, death-defying stunts for family picnics, and the rush of battle for the warmth of Adelina's embrace, and he wouldn't have it any other way. As the family gathered for their nightly ritual of stargazing and increasingly embellished tales of past exploits, Timothy couldn't help but grin. Life might be quieter now, but it was far from dull. With this crew, there was always a new adventure just around the corner, and he, for one, couldn't wait to see what the next chapter would bring. Hey there, space cadets and cosmic comedy enthusiasts. Well, wasn't that a wild ride through the galaxy? I hope you enjoyed this tale of Timothy, the man who could conquer worlds but chooses to conquer boredom instead. And let's not forget Adelina, the blue-skinned beauty who's probably developing a nervous twitch from all the near-death experiences. Oh, and little Mia, who's going to have the coolest take-your-daughter-to-work day stories ever. Now, I know what you're thinking. This story was more action-packed than a Wookiee family reunion and funnier than a hut in a tutu. And you're absolutely right. But here's the thing. I need you to tell me that too. So, if you laughed, cried, or just marveled at Timothy's ability to save the galaxy while reciting bad poetry, do me a solid and smash that like button. It's right there, probably glowing like a lightsaber. Go on, give it a poke. I promise it won't bite, unlike some of those alien fruits Timothy keeps eating. But wait, there's more. If you really want to make my day, and possibly inspire more cosmic chaos, leave a comment. Tell me your favorite part, your theories on Timothy's true origins, or your ideas for his next ridiculous self-imposed challenge. Maybe defeat an entire Imperial fleet using only interpretive dance. The possibilities are endless. Remember, every like and comment feeds the madness. It's like fuel for the hyperspace engine of my imagination. Without your feedback, I might start writing sensible, down-to-earth stories about, I don't know, accounting or something. And nobody wants that, right? So go forth, spread the word, and may the farce be with you. Until next time, keep your towel handy and don't forget to look up at the stars occasionally. You never know when a certain madcap hero might come crashing through your atmosphere. Thanks for listening, you beautiful bunch of nerf herders.